So we can continue on this exploration of the suttas. This morning I'm going to have a look at the next sutta on the list, which is called Ignorance. And the idea with this particular sutta, again, is that it is like an overview sutta. It's not really the details of the path yet, but it is an overview of the path, the big picture of the path. So this is the last of this type of sutta, and afterwards we will kind of move into more the details of how the path actually works. But I think it's always useful to see the big picture, and when you see the big picture, you see how everything kind of falls into place within that larger, like bird's eye view, if you like, seeing things from above, seeing things from a distance. This sutta called Ignorance, and the Pali word for ignorance is avijja. And the word avijja is a very interesting word, very important word on the Buddhist path. It is the first factor that you find independent origination, right? It starts off with avijja, and then you have avijja, paccaya, sankhara. Avijja is the cause or the condition for sankharas. The sankharas being the activities, the volitional or the willed activities of body, speech and mind. So it's a very important idea on the Buddhist path, the idea of avijja. So what does it actually mean? Is it ignorance? Is it really a suitable translation? Is it appropriate? Or is it possible to maybe improve on that, or at least to see another aspect of this perhaps? What actually are we dealing with here? And to be able to see what is going on with the word avijja, it is useful to look at the opposite first of all. The opposite of avijja is vijja. Take the A away and we get vijja, which is the opposite. And vijja in the Buddhist teaching is always about the insights, the true understanding of the nature of reality. So it's about seeing things like rebirth, understanding the cause and conditions for the arising and passing away of beings, right? The kamma, if you like. And it's also about eventually the insights of becoming an arahant. In other words, the insight into the Four Noble Truths, which includes the insight into the three characteristics of impermanence, suffering, and non-self, the three characteristics of existence. So that is what really vijja is about, seeing things according to reality, seeing what is going on. And that's why I think insight is actually a very good translation for vijja. It is often translated as like true knowledge, for example. I think that is Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. But I know Ajahn Brahm likes to call it, translated as insight, and I agree with that. I think that's a very nice way of putting it, because it's a way of seeing reality in the right way. So avijja then, that we have here, is the opposite of that, is not seeing things according to reality, not seeing things in terms of the three characteristics, not understanding the reality of rebirth, and all of these things. And of course, ignorance is an aspect of that, because we are ignorant of what things are like. But I think maybe a better way of looking at it is as delusion. We are deluded about the nature of reality. We tend to think that things are in one way, when actually they are the exact opposite. We see permanence where there is impermanence. We see a self, we see an I, we feel an I, right? It feels very real. We feel this I, even when actually there is no real referent. It doesn't actually refer to anything within us. So delusion, I think, is a very nice way of translating this word, avijja. Delusion, misunderstanding, misapprehension of reality of the world. And I think that gets us closer to what it means, perhaps, because ignorance often means an ignorant person might be someone who doesn't know a particular thing, but that is not really this is not kind of the full explanation, at least, of what avijja is about. Just a little bit of background on this word, avijja and vijja, which are such important ideas in the Buddhist teachings. So let us have a look at the very first sentence here, which is a very interesting way of looking at things. And the Buddha says the following: Bhikkhus, this is said, a first point of ignorance, bhikkhus, is not seen, such that before this there was no ignorance, and afterwards it came into being. And this is one of those very interesting points of Dhamma, which is very specific to the Buddhist teachings. There's almost no other teaching you find anywhere that has this kind of idea in it. The first point of ignorance is not seen. What that means here is that ignorance or delusion cannot be traced. There is no first cause. There is no beginning of this. And the only way that this makes any sense is of course within the idea, samsaric idea of rebirth in Buddhism. That is the only way you cannot have a first point. If the world begins when you are born, or the world begins at the Big Bang or whatever, then there is a first point. There always will be. So a first point of ignorance cannot be seen is very similar to saying that there is no first point of samsara itself. There is no beginning to be found. These are just two ways of looking at the same thing. Samsara exists because of ignorance, and ignorance in many ways can be regarded as one of the conditions for the continuation of samsara. And this shows us something about the nature of samsara, the idea that samsara and ignorance are almost, in a sense, very closely related to each other. The Buddhist idea of samsara is not the idea of a universe out there which kind of expands and goes on and follows certain scientific laws or laws of nature and patterns. That is not really what samsara is about. Samsara is our experience. It is actually how we perceive the world. That is the real samsara. And the way we perceive the world is, well, it's this, it's what we're perceiving right now. And that perception and experience then goes on. And it is that perception that is described, that experience that is described in things like dependent origination. And that experience, that moving on of that experience from one life to another one, ever changing, that is what samsara really is about. The internal moving on, the personal moving on from one life to the next one. And it has no beginning, it says here. No beginning can be seen. And again, this is very different from almost any other philosophy or religion that you find in the world. I think one of the main points of most religions is to kind of show us how things start out. Right? In the beginning, God created the universe, and all religions have this kind of ideas, this mythology, the legends of how things arise, how things actually come into being. And if you look at the kind of predominant scientific ideas these days, these are not really scientific, haven't been scientifically proven yet. These are just scientific ideas because science doesn't really have a very good grasp of how everything began. But the predominant ideas these days is the idea of the Big Bang, right? Everything started in the Big Bang. And I think there's a famous saying, because nobody can really figure out how come something comes out of nothing. If there was nothing beforehand, and then you have the Big Bang, how is that possible? And I think some kind of clever scientist said, well, just give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And that's what it's like, right? The free miracle is how the Big Bang arose. And then we can explain everything, but we can't really explain that. And this is where, to me, the Buddhist ideas are far more sensible, because they don't have that first point. There is no kind of miracle in the beginning where suddenly everything came into existence. There's always another cause before the previous cause, going back, and no beginning can actually be found. This is one of those things that makes the Buddhist teaching so unique and so different from almost anything else, and that you find anywhere else. And I think that as science is, of course, always trying to resolve these issues, and I think that eventually science will come down on the side of Buddhism. This will be interesting to see, right? Is Buddhism going to be proved right by science? And I say that eventually, and it's hard to know, of course, but eventually I think maybe scientific hypothesis is going to align with the Buddhist idea that, you have multiple universes, one after the other one, like the cycle of universes coming. No first point can be found. The Big Bang actually was not the first point, but it goes on before that. That is my prediction. So because the Buddha said so, and because science doesn't know what's going on, I think that's a kind of fairly to me anyway, it's a sensible way of looking at things. So again, to me, this is kind of one of the strengths of the Buddhist teaching, that it is so realistic in so many ways. It really it deals with reality. It doesn't deal with kind of things that it doesn't create unnecessary assumptions and unnecessary ideas, things that are at odds with how the world works. But it seems to be it works really, really well, which is what is so wonderful about it. And the other thing that is interesting here, it says here that the first point is not seen, right? It doesn't say that the universe or samsara, whatever, goes back infinitely. In fact, there are some later Buddhist texts that says that there is like no beginning at all. It goes back infinitely into the past. But that is not what the early Buddhist teachings say. They say no first point can be discovered. So the idea here, of course, is that you can only go back so far into the past. You can't go back infinitely into the past. That's impossible. All you can do is go back so far, because your capacity for remembering past events is going to have a certain limit. You may be able to go a bit further still, but eventually you will reach a limit, because you just don't have time to go back infinitely into the past. And this is kind of, again, this pragmatic idea of the Buddha's teachings. You don't overstep the bounds. You don't go into speculation. It's not a philosophy. It's not about guessing how the world actually works. It's about what you can actually see, and then teaching what you actually have seen. And what you have seen is that, well, no matter how far I go back, I can't find the first point. And because that is what the Buddha has seen, that is what he says. No matter how far back I go, I can't see a first point. So this idea of empirical evidence that the Buddha uses, in this sense, it is similar, of course, to more modern scientific ideas. You don't kind of overstep the bounds or what can be known. You tell people what is there, don't go beyond that. So again, it's a nice thing about the Buddhist teachings, that it has a very a realistic and modern flavor to it in so many ways. So that is just that little bit of background for you. There are some of these little things that you find in the suttas, and I will maybe talk a little bit more about this later on, because to me that really gives me confidence in these teachings, that they are so realistic in so many ways. No first point is seen, such that before this there was no delusion, and afterwards it came into being. Still, delusion or ignorance is seen to have a specific condition. There is a cause for ignorance, or there is a condition for it. There is a nutriment for it, as we will see in the beginning here, see in a second here. And this, of course, is interesting when we talk about dependent origination. Dependent origination begins with avidya, begins with the idea of delusion. And of course, if we're going to eliminate that delusion, it is very useful that it has a condition. If it doesn't have a condition, if it is a solid thing that is always there, we can't do anything about it. So the fact that it has a condition means we can deal with this ignorance, with the delusion, and we can try to undermine it and move towards insight and understanding rather than delusion. So that's the good news, that it has a specific condition. If it didn't have that, we would be in serious trouble. And so this whole thing that is coming now is talking about the specific condition of this avidya, of delusion, how to undermine it, how to get rid of delusion, how to see things in accordance with reality. So this here is, for that reason, I think very interesting, and it gives us a very beautiful, grand picture of what the path is all about. So let us have a look at this. So I say, bhikkhus, that delusion has a nutriment. It is not without nutriment. And what is the nutriment of delusion? It should be said, the 5 hindrances. So here we have the idea of nutriment. A nutriment is a particular type of conditioning. And the idea of nutriment is just like food, basically. A nutriment and food, it is there, it has two effects on a person or on a condition. And the two effects is that it helps it to grow, right? The more nutriment you have, the more it grows. And it also helps it to exist in the first place. Without nutriment, things tend to wither, they tend to die, they tend to eventually pass away. So nutriments has this thing of it helps things to grow, and it also helps things to exist in the first place. So these two things are important. Take away the nutriment, it will decline and eventually disappear altogether. So what is the nutriment for delusion? And it says here the 5 hindrances, the 5 nivaranas. And of course the 5 hindrances are, just to recap in brief, in case you are a little bit new to this, these are the essential, the sense desires, the kama chanda, the vyapada, which is the ill will, the tiredness and lethargy, tinamida, and the restlessness and remorse, uddhacca kukkaccha, and last one, vicikiccha, which is doubt. These are the 5 hindrances, the 5 things that kind of block us on the path, if you like, to awakening here. And so these are the things that are the nutriment for delusion. And so what that means then is it means 2 things. It means that if the hindrances are strong, the stronger the hindrances are, the more nutriment there is for delusion. Yeah? So the more hindrances you have in the mind, the more delusion you have, the less insight you have, the less clarity you have. Every time the hindrances go down and they are less, there is less nutriment for delusion. The more clarity you have. And what it also means, that's the first thing that it means. So it's always good to reduce the hindrances. It reduces delusion in our life. And the second thing that it means that if you eliminate the hindrances altogether, then this very support for delusion to exist at all is completely undermined. Take away the 5 hindrances, and there is no support there for delusion anymore. And at that point, all you have to do is direct your mind in the right way. And if you direct your mind in the right way, then you will be able to penetrate, you're able to see reality as it actually is. So this is you can see how important these hindrances are. These are the very thing that supports delusion and hinders us in our ability to see things in the right way. So very, very important. So the more we take these away, the more clarity we have. And it's useful to think about this and to see in your own life that this actually is the case. It is not all that hard to see. Sometimes if you feel angry or upset about something, you will know, if you are careful about comparing that state to when you feel at ease, you feel relaxed, you feel a sense of goodwill to people. If you compare those states, you will see that the state of ill will is a state of delusion. When you get things wrong, when you make mistakes, and afterwards you regret it, right? You think, oh, I did this thing. What a silly thing that was. And the reason, of course, is because when you are angry, you tend to have a vested interest in a certain way, in a certain behavior, in a certain way of looking at things. And that vested interest will distort the way you react to the things around you. Same thing with desire, right? You have a vested interest in the object of desire. So you are distorted in favor of that object rather than actually seeing things neutrally. So this is what we mean by taking away all this vested interest, taking away all these distortions of perception. And when they are taken away completely, then we have clarity. This is what is meant by vipassana, right? Clear seeing. Vipassana is hindered by the hindrances. Take away the hindrances and you have vipassana. The vipassana, the less hindrances you have, the stronger that vipassana is going to be. The more clarity you have, the more clear vision of reality you have when the hindrances are taken away. Vipassana is not often translated as insight, but vipassana is something that just rises and ebbs and rises depending on the state of your mind at any particular time. So if you have few hindrances in the mind, your clarity of vision is going to be high. You're going to have more vipassana. It's not so much that you have insight at that time, but you see things clearly here. The more hindrances there are, the less clarity you have. Vipassana is going to go down. And samatha follows along with vipassana. These things ebb and flow depending on the qualities of mind that you have at any particular time. So this is how the hindrances support delusion. And when the hindrances are completely gone, then the mind is ready for insight. The distortions have been taken away. All you have to do then is direct your mind in the right way. And you might have thought perhaps that this means that anyone who takes away, abandons the hindrances will reach awakening, but it's not really as simple as that, because it also depends on your outlook. If you come to this with the wrong outlook, with the wrong understanding, with the wrong view, is what we call it in Buddhism, you won't actually be able to direct your mind in the right way at this particular point. You have preconceived ideas about the nature of reality, and those preconceived ideas are going to stop you from seeing things in the right way. This is why two things are required: the word of another, like the Buddha, in other words, so you can direct your mind in the right way, and also the abandoning of the five hindrances. Both of these two things together is required at this particular point. Otherwise, if you come to the samadhi states, right, and the samadhi, wow, this is so wonderful, this is so fascinating, my sense of self is completely gone, I'm completely blissed out, I'm unified with the universe, I found the ultimate reality. Right? This will be your natural way of looking at samadhi if you have an idea of an ultimate reality beforehand, if you believe that there is some kind of permanent essence to the universe, call it whatever you like, the ground of all being, the eternal consciousness, God, it doesn't really matter what you call it. There's all these different names for these things out there. But if you have a viewpoint, that kind of viewpoint beforehand, you get to samadhi, you're going to have that viewpoint confirmed, because that is exactly what it feels like. So this is why it is so important to have this open mind, this ability to actually investigate things thoroughly at this particular point. So 5 hindrances is the nutriment. So we really want to get rid of these 5 hindrances, right? To see how important they are. You can really see them in context here, what it is all about. And now let us go backwards, stage by stage, and we will see how each one of these things in turn are supported by further nutriments. The 5 hindrances too, I say, have a nutriment. They are not without nutriment. And what is the nutriment for the 5 hindrances? It should be said to 3 kinds of misconduct. 3 kinds of misconduct is by body, speech, and mind, right? We're talking about this yesterday. I was talking a lot about the idea of sila, of character, of habit, etc. Yesterday. And here we are back again with that, the 3 kinds of misconduct. This is the support for the 5 hindrances, which in a sense is great, right? So if you practice properly, if you practice morality, if you are kind by body and by speech, if you are gentle with the way you treat other people, just that much actually undermines the 5 hindrances already here. So just by living well, you're already undermining the 5 hindrances, which is wonderful. Why is that the case? Well, I think in large part because when you live well, first of all, it gives you a sense for being happy about your own conduct, and that happiness that comes from good conduct, that itself undermines the negative states of mind, right? That kind of happiness is the opposite of the 5 hindrances in a sense, because that happiness is a spiritual positive quality here. But also when you practice goodness in your life, generally you try to do what is right, you're almost as if you're forcing your mind to see the world in a different way, forcing yourself to see people in a positive light. It's very difficult to be kind consistently if you have negative opinions about other people. So it's almost as if you are you're encouraging your mind, leading your mind towards positive perception of the world and the people around you, just by acting in a kind way, being nice, etc. But of course, again, one of the important aspects here, again, about these 3 kinds of misconduct is, of course, is the misconduct of the mind itself. And this is one of those things that if you're really going to practice the Buddhist teachings fully, is that you have to try to deal with the mind, directly working with the mind, to see the world and see people in a different way. When I say see the world in a different way, it's almost equivalent to seeing people, because people is usually the biggest problem in life, right? People is where we have the greatest happinesses in some ways, but also the greatest problems. People are really can be, they're so kind of varied in a sense. There is the Buddha in the world, and then there's Mara, right? The opposite ends of the scale. And so we try to hang out with the Buddhas and try to avoid the Maras as much as possible. I think there was a saying by somebody like, I think it was Jean-Paul Sartre, the famous French philosopher. He said that, what did he say? Suffering in life, other people, that's what suffering in life is, other people, or something like that.
Yeah. The hell is the other.
Hell is the other, okay, yeah, okay. Hell is the others, right, okay. So similar kind of idea, yeah. yeah. So that's so there you are. So that becomes one of those very fundamental things, and I will talk quite a bit more about this later on, because it is so important if you want to practice this path fully, to how to deal with this particular issue, how to work with the mind in the right way. So, but it's good news, right? Just by practicing virtue, by being good people, by doing things in the right way, we are actually moving towards vipassana, calm, insight, the destruction, the elimination of delusion. All of these kind of things comes in a very large part from sila, from practicing sila fully. So let us go on to the next one. The three kinds of misconduct too, I say, have a nutriment. They are not without nutriment. And what is the nutriment for the three kinds of misconduct? It should be said, non-restraint of the sense faculties. So non-restraint of the sense faculties means that you are just allowing your senses to play around in the world without any kind of limitations. You are kind of just allowing your eyes and your ears to go wherever they please. And when you do that, of course, that will tend to have a detrimental effect on your mind. It will tend to give rise to aversions and desires without any kind of holding back in what is going on. And if you do that in this way, then of course that will have a bad effect on your conduct, because with a lot of desires and aversion and ill will in your mind, that is precisely what is meant by a very important aspect here of misconduct. So to be able to live in a virtuous way, we need some of this restraint of the senses. It is one of those very crucial aspects of the Buddhist path. And it's very important to understand what this restraint of the senses actually refers to. When you hear the word restraint of the senses, it sounds like you're going to have to use a lot of force to hold you back, rein in the senses, force the eye to look in a different direction, right, and that kind of stuff. But one of the things I will point out, and that I like to point out on all of these retreats, is that restraint of the senses is mostly about wisdom, and that too is about using your mind in the right way, rather than using willpower to hold yourself back. So this is a very important thing, because it's so easy to get the idea of restraint wrong. We think restraint means willpower, when actually it means wisdom. It means yoniso manasikara, the wise attention. It means sampajanya, clear comprehension or full awareness of things. In other words, it means using wisdom in the right way. This is by far the most important aspect of this sense restraint. Then, when you restrain the senses in that way, then the mind becomes very even. Instead of kind of jumping around, desiring one thing, being averse to something else, giving rise to ill will, all the time having this incredible yo-yo mind in the world. Instead of having the yo-yo mind, you have the even mind. You go, as it says in one of the suttas, you are even among the uneven in the world. You flow through the world, and your mind is fairly equanimous. You can observe things. You can be aware of what is going on around you without always being sidetracked by all of these defilements. And that's very nice. I'm sure you will all have noticed that. Sometimes the mind is very even. You can just observe, and you don't actually get pulled around by the senses all the time. And we all know that is a very nice state of mind. You feel cool, you feel mindful, you feel as if you have a kind of ability to control yourself. You feel in charge of your life rather than all these other things being in charge of your life. And that feels very nice when you feel a sense of being in charge of yourself. Mindfulness is specifically said to be a controlling faculty, and the idea of controlling faculty is precisely that you have some degree of being in charge of your own life, of your own mind, of how you live, basically. So this is the idea of sense restraint, the Indriya Sangvara Sila, as it is called in Pali, and I will look at this in much more detail later on. And then we come to the next one, which is very closely related to this. And what is the nutriment for non-restraint of the sense faculties? It should be said, lack of mindfulness and clear comprehension. So lack of mindfulness and clear comprehension to be able to have a sense of restraint of the sense faculties, to be able to have the ability to turn your mind, using your wisdom, to turn your mind in a different direction, you have to have awareness of what is going on. You have to see that if I keep my attention on this for a little bit longer now, desire is going to arise, aversion is going to arise, ill will is going to arise. This person I'm with right now, I find really difficult. If I stay here a little bit too longer, ill will is going to arise. So let me see how I can get out of this. You know what's happening in your mind, right? And that gives you an opportunity to take a different course. If you don't know what's going on, if you have no mindfulness, if you have no awareness of what's happening, there's no possibility of taking a different course. You're going to be lost. The defilements are going to be in charge. And this is what happens a lot of the time, right? Before we know it, we have kind of gotten ourselves into a state of desire or ill will that is overpowering us, and we can't barely trace the steps because we didn't have enough mindfulness to really see how that happened, how we got into that problematic situation in the first place. And a very important part of this mindfulness, for it to work properly, you have to have what is called here the clear comprehension at the same time. This is the sampajanya in Pali. And clear comprehension is what tells you whether something is appropriate or not. Is this the right thing to do, or is it not the right thing to do? So what are we trying to do here? Well, we're trying to improve our minds. We're trying to get more peace, more mindfulness, more clarity, more calm, all of these kind of things, more compassion, more kindness in our mind. So you ask yourself, what I'm doing now, where this is heading, is that going to give rise to more of these good qualities? Or is it going to give rise to more of the bad qualities, more desire, more ill will, etc.? That is clear comprehension. You know whether what you are doing is suitable for where you want to go. In the Pali, in the commentaries, they talk about suitability and purpose as being two of the important aspects of clear comprehension. So what is your purpose? And is what you are doing, is it suitable for that purpose? And our purpose, if we want to practice the Buddhist path, should always be to increase in good qualities and decline in bad qualities. It is simple as that, very easy rule of thumb to know whether you are doing what is right or not. And Ajahn Brahm, he always tells that story, right? You must have heard that story many times before. It's kind of, I think, it's in his books, etc. And he gives a very nice example of mindfulness without clear comprehension. That is a story. He talks about this some kind of wealthy lady somewhere, right, who had a big house full of very valuable things, lots of jewelry and expensive paintings on the wall and what have you. And she was going out in the evening. She was going somewhere to a restaurant somewhere to enjoy herself, going to the theater or whatnot. And then when she leaves her house, because she's very, very wealthy, she has a guard in front of the house. And she says to her guard, please watch carefully, observe carefully, because I'm going to go out for the evening. And the guard says, yes, ma'am, I will observe very, very carefully. I've been to Vipassana retreats. I know exactly how I have to be careful what I say, actually. So I know how to observe. And then, of course, she goes out, and then when she comes back after the long night out, she comes to her house, that door is open, right? All the expensive paintings have been kind of taken out, the safe is open, all her jewelry has been stolen, right? And she gets really upset, of course, and she goes to her, "You terrible guard, you said you were going to observe and be mindful, what's going on?" And then the guard says, "Yeah, I was really, really mindful. I was observing very carefully. When the thieves were coming, I was saying, 'Thieves coming, thieves coming.' When the thieves were breaking into the house, thieves breaking into the house, thieves breaking into the house. When they were opening the safe, thieves." So, and this is the problem. This is the distinction. It shows you very clear the distinction between bare mindfulness and mindfulness together with clear comprehension. Yeah, and that is kind of the wrong kind of mindfulness that you have there. It's exactly the same thing. You can be aware of the defilements with mindfulness, but actually doing something about it is what really matters on the Buddhist path. That is what we're trying to do here. So that is just in brief about clear comprehension or full awareness, how that works, and why it is so important at this particular point. Then we can move on to the next one. What is the nutriment for lack of mindfulness and clear comprehension? It should be said careless attention or unwise attention. This is ayoniso manasikara. And this is one of those very important terms on the Buddhist path, the idea of yoniso manasikara on the one hand and ayoniso manasikara on the other hand. I like the idea of unwise attention. It could be, I think somebody recently translated as a rational attention or something like that. In other words, I'm not sure if that quite works, but anyway, it's an interesting idea. The idea here is whether your attention is in accordance with the Dhamma or not. Basically, that's what it comes down to. And so this is it's one of those very important factors because it is at the root of the very Buddhist path. To even get started on the Buddhist path, you have to have some degree of yoniso manasikara, some degree of wise attention. You have to have some sense of what is right in the world, what will give rise to happiness and what won't. This is kind of fundamental, and all the way through the path, all the way to awakening, yoniso manasikara plays a role all the way up. Every time you have yoniso manasikara, you're heading in the right direction. Every time you have ayoniso manasikara, you're heading in the wrong direction. Yeah, and this becomes very, very crucial here. And sometimes people think, yeah, I know what wise attention is, right? We all kind of think that we have some idea of wisdom. But again, very useful to have some fairly a strong and clear definition of what this means. And one of the few suttas where yoniso manasikara is actually defined is in Majjhima Nikaya number 2, the Sabbasava Sutta, the sutta on all the defilements or corruptions of the mind. And in there it says what you perhaps might expect, that yoniso manasikara is what you have when the good qualities of the mind are increasing and the bad qualities are decreasing. And ayoniso manasikara is when the bad qualities are increasing and the good ones are declining. So that gives you a very nice idea of what yoniso manasikara is like, or what it is all about. It's about this, always, everything is about the improvement of our mental state. And one of these very important root fundamental qualities on the Buddhist path. Okay, so what is then the cause, or what is the nutriment for this careless attention, ayoniso manasikara? And it should be said, lack of faith. Saddha is the cause for careless attention. And it's interesting, isn't it? We are here talking about wisdom, the use of wisdom on the Buddhist path. And what it is saying again, it says that lack of faith is a cause for lack of wisdom, in a sense. That is essentially what it is saying here. It's one of those strange things in Buddhism where the idea of faith or confidence is so closely related to the idea of wisdom. Very often when we talk about faith, it's almost as if we use it in contradistinction to knowledge and understanding and wisdom. If you have faith, it means precisely you haven't got knowledge. But in Buddhism, the idea of faith and confidence is very closely related to the idea of understanding, knowledge, and wisdom. The more knowledge, the more understanding, the more wisdom you have, the stronger is your faith, the stronger is your confidence. And when you have perfect wisdom, when you have perfect understanding, it is only then that your faith and your confidence also becomes perfected. So in wisdom, in Buddhism rather, these things go together. They build up together. They are two sides of the same coin. Confidence on the one hand, wisdom on the other. And this is very different from the vast majority of other spiritual teachings in the world, where faith and understanding are often in contradiction to each other. Right? The ideas that you sometimes get, you get your faith tested because things are really are irrational, and if things are irrational, that's when your faith gets really tested. Actually, in Buddhism, it's the other way around. The more sense it makes, the more powerful your confidence usually is. And for this reason, faith is actually the root cause here for wise attention. It starts off with the word of the Buddha, having confidence in that, because the Buddha tells you from the very outset how to have yoniso manasikara, what a yoniso manasikara is, how to look at things, how to perceive, so that actually it increases your good qualities and gives rise to a decline in the bad ones. And when you read the word of the Buddha, it's not something very weird. It makes good sense, right? Why do you get upset? Well, the reason why you get upset about something is because you're focusing on the negative qualities in somebody. It's very sensible, very easy to understand. It makes very good sense. But then when you see it in the word of the Buddha, of course, that increases your ability to use that in practice in your daily life. It reinforces a wisdom that is already inside of you in many ways. And this is, I think, one of the geniuses of a really good spiritual teacher, is not just to teach us something that is absolutely brand new, something that we have no idea about, but the genius of a real spiritual teacher is to give rise to the natural understanding and wisdom that is already inside of us, because then it becomes far more powerful. If the spiritual teacher says something that's completely out of the blue, that you have no idea how to relate to, then either you have faith or you don't. But if the spiritual teacher says something that you already know to be true, and just reinforces that, then the value of that statement is far greater, and you have far more ability to act upon that in a good way. So when the Buddha tells you that, well, don't look at things this way, in a way we already know it's true, but when the Buddha says it, it reinforces it in such a way that it enables us to act upon that in a more powerful way. So faith gives rise to wisdom, faith gives rise to right attention, confidence gives rise to this thing here. Once the Buddha tells us this, then we know this is the right way. And as we then act upon that, as we gain more clarity for ourselves, as we see the truth of these teachings, it becomes our own wisdom in an even more profound sense. Until one day, confidence and wisdom become perfectly aligned. They become two sides of the same coin, if you like. So what is the nutriment of faith? And not surprisingly, the nutriment of faith is hearing the good Dhamma, the true Dhamma, if you like. The Sad Dhamma is the Pali word for that. When you hear the good Dhamma, you think, yeah, that's really cool stuff. I really like these teachings. They're really great. And then when you hear that, you gain faith and confidence as a consequence of that. And what is the nutriment for hearing the good Dhamma? And it says here, associating with good persons. These are the sappurisas in the Pali language. These are sometimes translated as the superior people in the world. And a superior person from a Buddhist point of view are the people who have understood the Dhamma for themselves. The people who know, who have seen the reality of things, seen the three characteristics, seen dependent arising, seen the idea of rebirth, seen all of these things. This is the true, this is what here is called the superior people. Why are they superior? Well, precisely because of that, because they understand happiness and suffering. They understand what we have to do to be able to move towards more happiness in life and move away from suffering. This is what reality is all about. This is why we want to see reality, right? Because when you see reality, when you see things in the right way, you can actually make good decisions in life. If you have no idea what's going on, how are you going to make good decisions? You can't. You've got to see things appropriately, first of all. If you want to go down to Bodhinyana Monastery, you want to know the way. You don't want to know the wrong way, otherwise there's no way you're going to get there. In exactly the same way here, you have to have the right kind of input in your life, otherwise you're not going to get there. So that input is the Sappurisa. Sappurisa number one is the Buddha, of course. He is number one superior person. Apart from the Buddha, all the other Aryans, all the other noble people in the world are also these superior people that you can listen to. So that is the root cause, right? It doesn't go any further than this. It stops there. The first cause here that gets you eventually to the abandoning of delusion, or in this case, what supports delusion is not associating with good people, not associating with these superior people. This is the root cause. This is the root problem. And of course, the reverse side of the coin is that if the more you associate with the right people, the more you are building up all these causes that kind of undermine all of this, undermine ultimately delusion itself. So this is what this is about. And very interesting idea, because it makes the Buddhist path in many ways so simple. All you have to do is keep on doing the right thing, hanging out with the right people, reading the suttas, listening to the true Dhamma. And as you do that, this whole thing kind of happens as a matter of course. All of these things fall into place. Why is that? How can it be so simple? How can it just be a matter of listening to the teachings and then everything happens? And the reason why it is so simple is because you are getting brainwashed, right? That is the reason. So the question is, are you ready to be brainwashed? So this is why you're here, right? To be brainwashed. I'm sure you are aware of that already. But remember, the point here is that regardless of what you do in life, you're going to get brainwashed anyway. The idea of brainwashing in Buddhism, I'm just using kind of a term which is interesting, but the point of course is that we are conditioned as human beings. And that conditioning is so profound, it is so deep, it is so all-encompassing. It takes every aspect of our personality is conditioned in one way or another. And because of that, we don't have any choice but to be brainwashed. Who you are right now as a person, who I am right now, is just the result of all the brainwashing that's been going on for so long in the past. Right? You've been brainwashed, and now you happen to be what you are. You have certain views, certain outlooks, certain ways of thinking about the world. Well, that precisely is brainwashing. It doesn't feel that way. It feels that these are my views, right? And I have thought them out rationally and with good reasons. That is what it feels like. But actually, that is not really the reality. The reality is that this has been brainwashed into you, and that is why you are the way you are. So what that means is that we've got to get the right brainwashing. So you've got to choose the right brainwashing. Okay, this brainwashing or that brainwashing. Okay. It's a bit like finding the right washing powder in the right washing machine. It's a bit like that. So this is what it is about. So we have to ask ourselves very carefully, what is the brainwashing that is going to lead to my own happiness and the happiness of people around me? And this is where it gets very tricky, because of course that in turn also is a kind of brainwashing. But the point is that our wisdom faculty is, because it has developed in a certain way, you're able to use that to help you out to choose the right kind of brainwashing. So we ask ourselves, and that is what really matters. What matters is that we choose those things that truly lead to happiness in the world and truly lead away from suffering. And then we allow that to help us out, to kind of guide us on this path. And then we are heading in the right direction. But what it means, of course, is that if this is the foundation of the entire path, it means the importance of always allowing ourselves, allowing this input from the Buddha, from these superior people, going back to this again and again and again, reflecting on it. It is not enough just to hear it. You have to reflect on these things. In the suttas, the Buddha very often talks about listening to the Dhamma, then remembering it to some extent, then reflecting on it, and as you reflect on it, you start to accept it. It becomes part of your outlook, part of your view of the world, right? But all of this takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So a very important part of this is then that reflection process whereby you come to understand these things properly and then take them on board as your outlook, your way of looking at things. So whenever you feel in life that you need a bit of support, whenever you feel that you're losing your way a little bit, even if you're not losing your way, make sure to always come back to these teachings, always come back to those people in the world who have a real understanding of what is going on. Listen to good Dhamma talks, yeah? Read a little bit of the word of the Buddha. Listen to those teachers that teach in accordance with the word of the Buddha. And then you will be on the right track. And keep on doing that. Keep on reflecting on these teachings. Gradually, you're moving in the right direction. And all of this, the reason why all of this is so important, of course, it all ties in with the Buddhist idea of non-self. Because from a Buddhist point of view, there is no permanent core, there is no inherent essence inside of us that is the real you, which kind of can guide you, can always be there like a pillar, withstanding all the problems in the world, withstanding all the pressures from outside. Because there is no pillar inside of us like that, it means that we are entirely dependent upon the conditioning outside of us, or inside of us for that matter. That is what we are. We are the sum total of the conditioning that has worked on us in this life and also in previous lives. And because of that, it means that the conditioning is the be-all and end-all of what it is to be a human being, or to be any kind of being. So the conditioning becomes so important. And I usually like to use the simile of if you have a ship on the ocean, a ship which has no steering mechanism, it has no engine or nothing like that. A ship that has no steering mechanism, no engine, no sails, no oars, no paddles, no nothing. That ship is entirely dependent upon the wind, the prevailing wind, and the currents of that ocean. The wind comes from the south, it will go north. If the current comes from the east, it will go west, right? And these are the things that will decide where the ship goes. So we are a bit like these ships on the ocean. We just drift around according to the prevailing currents at the time. And because of that, we have to make sure we get into the right current. We want to take the current that leads to Nibbana, right? If the ship wants to go to the north, it has to ensure that actually it gets to a place where the wind comes from the south and the currents come from the south. In the same way, we have to ensure that we get into the stream of the Dhamma that heads us and leads us towards Nibbana. And if we do that, then we will be on the right track. So this is what this is all about, get the right wind, the right currents, and then, whoa, swoosh, you move towards Nibbana as a consequence. So this is what we have to do, and this is the power and importance of the Kalyana Mitta, the Sappurisa, the Buddha, and all of these wonderful things that are so fundamental on the Buddhist path. And this is why now you can see why. I'm sure many of you will know the very famous saying, probably most of you know it already, in the suttas where the Buddha says that Kalyana Mitta, the good friendship, is not 50% of the holy life, Ananda. It's not half the holy life. It is 100% of the holy life. And now I'm sure you can see why that is the case. Kalyana Mitta is the root cause. It is the foundation upon which everything else is built. Without the Kalyana Mitta, without that foundation, there's no way you even get started on this path because you haven't got the right outlook. You are brainwashed by the washing powder, which doesn't really work. It leaves you more dirty when you come out than when you start it off. And that is then the problem for this. So there you are. That is the first part of this sutta on avijja. We will finish it off this afternoon, and then we will see how it all ties together very nicely once we see the whole thing. In the meantime, please have a nice meal and keep on enjoying your meditation, and we'll see you again at 3 o'clock here.